Welcome everyone to Alliance for a Viable Future podcast. I'm your host, Lev Natan, and really privileged today, as I feel every time that I am on this podcast with the guests. Just continually inspired, and today is no exception. I'm here with the Jewish Youth Climate Movement representatives of the core council. They'll give you the exact you know name of that particular group, but I'll just give a introduction for my connection. I like to say it like that because here at the Alliance, the core theory of change is that change flows through relationships at the speed of trust. And so the way that these conversations emerge for me is through trustworthy relationships. And, Yona Sadeh is here with Alex and Eli Anderson. Alex, forgive me, I don't have your last name, um, but you'll share it with me, share it with our guests when you start speaking. Um, Yona is the producer of the engineering of this podcast. He makes it sound good. And he is in 12th grade or 11th grade at Simon's Rock High School. And so I always brag about him that's who's making this podcast sound good. And I know his father, Shamu Sadeh, who's does incredible work. And so that's how I met Yona. Uh, over a couple of years ago, and he's been listening to these, in editing these conversations all this time, and recently said, "Hey, I do this work, this other part of my life. I'm part of this Jewish youth climate movement," and I was so inspired when he shared that with me, because it's like exactly what we're up to, in a different dimension, and it's part of the alliance building process. So, want to welcome Yona and Alex and Eli here, and give an opportunity to each of you to introduce yourselves, and where you live, and what you're up to in your lives, and why this is something that you're up to. There's lots of other things that you could be doing, that you're dedicating your time and energy, your heart and mind to this work. So yeah, whoever wants to jump in and get started.
Sure. I guess I can go first. Hi,
Thank
my name is
you, Yona.
Jonas Sadeh. I'm from Falls Village, Connecticut. I am 17 years old, and I am the communications director for JYCM. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. I first came on JYCM I think in the beginning, it was almost a year ago, actually, pre-COVID, pre-quarantine. The world was very different then. And it first came to me through Lyanna. And I was just told that they're creating this movement of Jewish teens that really would kind of be centered around mobilizing Jewish communities and getting other teens to act. And we would kind of be a product of Hazon, which is the Jewish Lab for Sustainability. They have a lot of other programs going, but we would be the first youth-oriented, youth-run, for youth, by youth organization, kind of thinking about the climate change. And so I was really excited when Lyanna approached me. This is Lyanna Rothman. She's one of the now leaders of JYCM, adult leaders of JYCM. And I was really excited about this opportunity because I had never really had the chance to have an outlet like this. I had done some past climate work. I'd gone to local climate protests and worked through my school, through the Sunrise Movement. But I didn't really have one place to channel all this love I had for the climate. And I think JYCM really has been a great experience for me. I mean, I've been able to take my love for social media work and my love for filmmaking and kind of tie that into climate change work and help JYCM with their social media and making videos and really spreading the word in the way I know best. And so I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Yona. Yeah, Eli or Alex?
Yeah, I can go. Hopefully y'all can hear me.
We can.
Okay. Is it I'm like so old with technology. Is it recording on Zencaster as well? Because I have the tab muted, so I don't get echoes.
You're doing good. It's good.
Okay, hopefully y'all can cut that out. Hi, my name is Alex Tannenbaum. I use the pronouns they, them, theirs. I'm one of like the only JYCM people in the Bay Area, and I'm the head of the DEI subgroup right now. I got into JYCM because my former, and hopefully this summer as well, boss at a summer camp, Urban Automa in Berkeley, connected me to Lyanna Rothman. And I'd already started doing some work connecting Jewishness and queerness at Keshet, and I was really excited for the opportunity to connect Jewishness with another aspect of my identity, which is something I think we should all have, caring about climate change and people affected by climate change. And I am also very excited to be here today.
Yeah, my name's Eli Anderson. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, pretty much middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the fundraising and partnerships director for JYCM. Similar to both of you too, I got into JYCM through someone who knew Lyanna and went to Teva with her, and he emailed me and Sophie Raskin, who's also on the board now, saying that we should apply and try and join this up and coming new organization that is going to hopefully change the world. And I'm super happy I did. I applied and then had conversations with Lyanna and tried to figure out how to best use my knowledge and leadership abilities to help JYCM. And similar to Yona, I think I didn't really have one place that I could kind of channel my environmentalism, because I never really had anywhere in Oklahoma to do that. I had always known climate change was a thing, but I didn't take real action until kind of high school. I always recycled, turn off the lights whenever I wasn't using them during the day and stuff. But then when I joined high school, I started going to marches and tried to try to create more action. But then JYCM came along, and then I had this amazing opportunity that had so many different ways that I could become active in this organization. And now we've helped educate so many people, and we really have done a lot. And I guess I can kind of go into explaining JYCM, like kind of the structure behind it. So it's not just the three of us. There are 8 people on the executive board, which all 3 of us are on. And then there's also 24, including those 8 on the leadership board. Those were the starting 24 people. But then we started in last September, we started creating these things called kvutzot or kvutza in singular. And now we've created, I believe, about 15, although I could be wrong. We're gaining one about like every other week, it seems. So I could have gotten that wrong, but last time I checked, there was 15. So those are all across the country. There's one in Tulsa. There's 3 in the, there's plenty on the East Coast. There's a couple on the West Coast. There's one in Boulder, I believe. They're from all across the country, and they're really trying to do their best to help their own communities. And that's kind of the basis behind our kvutzot, is to enact change in their specific communities. And through that, we've had a couple of really successful campaigns where we've reached over 20,000 people over the course of the last, I guess, almost year now. And we're hopefully going to reach another 20,000 before the next year, or hopefully more. But yeah, that's kind of JYCM by the numbers, but that doesn't necessarily kind of tell the whole story. I don't know. For partnerships, I usually tell why I love JYCM instead of just going by the numbers and stuff, because I think that makes a little bit more of a difference. So the reason why I love JYCM is specifically because of the community that we've built here. It's an amazing community. We have traditions now at the start of every meeting. We have a fun question where we go around and say, what's our favorite thing about Passover? And it takes entirely too long of the meeting. And then we usually run over the time limit, which I think is kind of fun. We have these 3 different subgroups in the leadership board: PR, communications, and A&A, which is actions and advocacy. And those 3 each do our own specific things. PR, we kind of deal with partnerships and some education points of view and some of the writing. Communications does the social media and the website, and then actions and advocacy. Their role is to create action and drive our like outward push to create good action and help kind of change the world as much as we can. And then within those, we all have our own, like, we're all really close. I know I'm really close with all the PR people. Like, I know them pretty well. And we have a bunch of traditions within each working group. And now we have the new DEI working group, which I don't know a whole lot about, but I'm sure Alex, who's the head of the DEI working group, can kind of tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure I can if Lev, you want me to do that.
That
Okay,
sounds great.
awesome. Yeah, DEI, for if anybody didn't know, I realized I should have probably explained this, stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And basically something that myself and some other people had noticed, and I'm sure most of the board had noticed actually, was that our space could be doing a lot better with racial diversity, accessibility, all that kind of stuff. So I started the initiative along with the help of Abby, who's our like adult advisor, and a bunch of other people, to just make sure that we are reflective of what every Jew looks like, sounds like, is like, all that kind of stuff. It's been good so far. We've put on a couple of events. I helped personally plan a panel on environmental racism. And then our first event, all of us as the official DEI group together, was for like 8 nights of action for Hanukkah. And it was a DEI identity-based slam poetry / arts night, which sounds very complicated, but it was actually this really cool thing where we got to have people from all different communities share poems, share artwork, and it was just like really, really fun. So yeah.
Awesome. That sounds great. All this is really amazing how organized it sounds to me, and how much it's growing. Like the numbers, and then also, like you're saying, the feel behind it, the culture of connection that you're building. And, before we started the recording, for me, as someone who was feeling when I was younger, like what's going on in the world? Something doesn't feel right. When I was in high school, or a lot of things don't feel right. It's just like, I was growing up in the 90s. I graduated from high school in 2000, just to date myself, but it's kind of the same stuff. Actually, it's just more intense at this point, 20 years later. So yeah, I'm curious, as someone who is supporting, wanting to have these intergenerational relationships, and be the intergenerational movement. What I want to look to you. You guys are, the most in the most intense situation on the planet, as young people, looking forward into the future. So what is, just like, it's amazing that you have this support from Hazon, and from, you know, adults in that, that's happening, and they can give you these opportunities to grow, and to organize yourselves, and to be in leadership. It's amazing. And I'm just curious, like what was that awareness like? I want to even do this, and like where did that spark come from? Like, there's something going on. That's because I don't know if that's, I'd like it to be more widespread. And so listening to you, it's going to give me that, inspiration and understanding of how do we invite more youth, right, and Jewish youth, and all youth, into this awareness in an inspiring way. I don't know if that made any sense, but whatever you want to whatever you want to say or respond with. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I can go. So I first became aware of climate change in general when I was actually very young, because my parents had this rule, right? I got 40 minutes of TV a day and 20 minutes had to be like a nature documentary. So I know a lot of weird facts still, but something I learned very early on is polar bears are endangered, ice caps are melting, climate change. I learned that early on. But I didn't really know what to do about it other than like recycling. And then I live in California. We're constantly in a drought. So turning the tap off, like I still, in movies when they have the tap running, like while brushing their teeth, I still like cringe. But I didn't know what to do other than that. So I think a really huge thing actually is providing the opportunity to youth, because like I keep saying, I didn't know what to do other than individualized action. I didn't know where to start. And having the opportunity to join JYCM and be part of a movement, be part of a community with a bunch of different people was really, really helpful. And I actually feel like I'm getting stuff done, and I think we are. So I think it doesn't quite answer your question, but I think something big is for people that are already aware, like giving them opportunities to get involved so they don't feel like, and they're not just doing nothing, because a lot of people know about it and a lot of people want to do something about it, want to do something big about it other than just like recycling and having compost and that kind of thing, which is important. But a lot of people want to take collective action, but they don't know how quite yet. And then if also like giving people more opportunities increases visibility, which then can increase awareness of the issue, gets more youth involved, hopefully saves the planet. So yeah, I think that would be my very roundabout sort of answer to your question.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in with that? Yona, Eli?
I was gonna say kind of something similar. There wasn't really a way for me to get involved other than recycling and turning off the lights in the house whenever it's like daytime, because we can see, because we have quite a few windows in the house. But just creating those opportunities to take collective action and not just make it so individualized is gonna really make the most difference. Each person doing as much as they can, like whether it be completely converting your house to solar electricity, or whether that's starting to recycle more and more, it's gonna create some change. But the most change that's going to happen is from like corporations and changing corporations. And we're not going to do that by ourselves. We need a collective action. We need a community to actually make them change their ways and help them to change their ways for the better, hopefully. But yeah, I think right now we can focus on both collective and individualized change to create the most difference. Because right now, I don't think as many people as I don't know, last year I would probably guess that a lot more people are taking more action than they are like trying to recycle, trying to turn off the car whenever you're just like sitting in a parking lot waiting to go inside or something like that. I think a lot less people than I realized actually do stuff like that. So I think focusing on individualized change, trying to change your behavior specifically, can make a really big difference. But after that, and while we still raise awareness for individualized change, we need to create these opportunities like the Kfutso, like we're creating, to help create that collective change.
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, Yona, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say I definitely want to second everything that Alex and Eli said. I think like Alex, I felt connected growing up to the environment, but I don't think I had a specific place to channel that. So I grew up on a farm, and so I obviously had a deep connection to the earth, and the people around me were practicing different things of like different early practices of sustainability and composting. But I don't think it really hit me until I started to experience those like I started to experience the the effects of climate change. And I think that is something big for people, is that
Like
a lot
what?
of people,
What were
well,
the effects that you?
yeah, I mean, so when I think I was around 10 or 11 years old, we had a big tornado hit our town, and I live in rural Connecticut. It's not a place where there's tornadoes. And I think like as this like 10-year-old, I'd read about tornadoes in books. Like it was like a thing I read in books that happened in faraway places. And I was like, wow, this is scary. And then like one hit here when I was young, and it just kind of like, I was like, wow, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the climate. This shouldn't be happening here. And then I think that was like when I first realized, like, whoa, this is something that we caused. We have to change this. I want to have a future. And so I think that is like, for me, that was what really drove me. And I think that is a lot of people maybe feel connected to the earth, and they want to change, but they haven't like experienced the effects of climate change directly, which is a big reason why there's not as many people motivated as we need to, right? And so I think like the same reason now as JYCM, we're trying to spread out personal stories. We had a whole storytelling campaign where what we did is we took stories from JYCM board members and stories from our Kahoot Soap members and stories from the public that we collected, and we tried to share those to the world, because I think like that is a really important way to mobilize communities and mobilize the world, is hearing like stories, firsthand stories of the effects of climate change. I mean, like Alex said, like you can hear like the stories of the polar bears are dying and the ice caps are melting, which is a really great introduction to it. But I think for a lot of people, there's a disconnect. I live in Connecticut. I don't have polar bears around here. There's like that big disconnect between that. And so I think although those things are great, the personal stories where you can connect, like I hear a story about somebody whose home has been destroyed by a fire. That's never happened to me, but I heard that, and it really hit me, because they had their whole belongings destroyed. They had all their schoolwork destroyed, all of their life's work. And I think that like hearing somebody's firsthand story is a really important part of mobilization. And so I think that is like, when I started joining JYCM, I realized that I had these experiences, and that's what mobilized me. And part of my duty now is to kind of spread that on, and like using my talent as a filmmaker and as a videographer, just to use that to kind of to get the word out there and spread it out there more.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, a little bit opposite from Yona. Yeah, a little bit opposite from Yona. I live in Oklahoma, so we have tornadoes every year. So they were kind of just growing up for me. That was a normal thing. So I think looking back on it, I feel like I was almost numb to the fact that we were getting worse and worse tornadoes, and we were getting more like very bad tornadoes as I was growing up. Because over the past couple of years, like I've started to notice more and more that there's a tornado that's coming right over my house that's going to land a couple miles on the other side of the path from me. Like there's been 2 tornadoes in the past 3 years that have touched down within 3 miles or 4 miles from my house, which I don't remember there ever being tornadoes like touching down nearly that close to my house. Like I remember going outside with my sister, running outside to go look at the green sky that like outside, and my mom coming and like kind of leisurely walking out to us, yelling for us to come back inside and come to the shelter, like wait out the tornado. And I remember even like sleeping through some tornadoes because my mom knew that they weren't going to be near us. But now when I hear the tornado siren, I wake up immediately, go down to the bathroom that's our shelter, turn on the news, and just like wait it out and make sure that everyone's fine. All my friends are fine and here. So I think I kind of the opposite perspective, where it was they're getting worse and worse, not that there was just one. But if I lived somewhere else, tornadoes would be a lot bigger of a deal than they are. But for me, it's just kind of part of life.
Yeah, thank you. It does. It gives me chills, to hear your stories, and what really, wakes you up. I mean, there's an awareness and waking up there's a difference. There's that like I jumped in cold water. Wow, I'm awake. To the intensity of what's going on. And I want to make the connection between that and something, Eli, that you said about helping corporations change. And so and all the action you're talking about, we can do. There's an individual action and collective action, which is what you all requested that we talk about today, is one of the main things. And the power of collective action. And I'm just curious, if you want to say, like what you mentioned, 20,000 people were reached, for towards what end is my question. What do you feel that the impact has been? What's the difference that has been made through the outreach that you've been doing, like in that really tangible way? Like I'm aware that we had a tornado here, and that's not a good thing. Something's wrong, and then to connect that to, when you guys are my age, in 20 years, I imagine you do know about the 2050 kind of time deadline, right? And actually that's an appropriate word, right? Deadline. It's like, if we have 30 years to really make it happen together on this planet as a human family. Like, let's make it happen and change it and make it good for you and your children and all the way down into the future. Like, that's how I'm seeing it. So what needs to happen? What do you guys see when you're you're going to be in 30, let's just say by 2050, right? In 30 years, you're going to be about almost 50 years old, right? Is that true? Around there, in the 40s, 50s, almost 50. So you're going to be, having families and whatever. Like, what does the world need to look like? What change needs to happen? Like, it's not we don't have, like, we can't negotiate with God, or nature, however you want to understand it, right? We have to listen right now. There's a big things happening, and I'm preaching to the choir here. So what are those things that you see? What's the change that you're already experiencing as part of the movement? And then how is that giving you that sense that we can do it? And this is what we can do. This is what we need to do in the next 30 years. Maybe those are challenging questions, but I know we're doing it together. So yeah, what do you got?
I think one of the first things that is going to create the most amount of change is to elect representatives who are actually going to take action in office. And I know that we're doing better with that over the last few years, just because more and more people who stand for the climate, who are actually taking action, are in the House of Representatives, are in Congress. They're actually taking action. So I think that's one of the first things that we need to do. That's also going to make the most change, because if those representatives sign a law that says that you have to completely revamp your emissions of each corporation and stuff like that, then it will create more change. And I think that's the first thing that we need to do that's also doable, because it's each individual community that stands for climate, that stands against climate change, can do it. We just need to find the right person to run for office and then vote for them.
I also think I just want to add on quickly. I think a little, I really love what you said, Eli. I think like a thing that I think a lot of people is holding people back from doing this is like, okay, the change that needs to happen are elected officials. Well, I obviously can't run for office right now, so we can't do anything. I think that's something that's holding people back. And really, that's not the case at all, because I think although we can't be the ones who run for office, what we can do as people, that there's power to the people, right? JYCM as a movement, our country is a movement. We can like tell, we can put pressure on these lawmakers to make this change. And so I think like that is really important, that recognizing that, okay, even though we can't necessarily elect ourselves into office or get a JYCM representative in office, we can push as the people, because we can say we won't vote for you unless you do this. And I think that's a really big thing that is sometimes overlooked when you're thinking about climate change and voicing your thoughts. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people don't do when they're protesting for climate change, is they don't think about the fact that we have power as people. Even though it may seem like we don't sometimes, we do, and we have the power to get the elected people in office that we want, and that can make a difference.
Thank you, Yona. Yeah, Alex, you want to?
Yeah, for sure. I think in that vein, right, like influencing elected officials is such a huge first step, because like something we're going to need more regulations on emissions, especially I think like large corporations. We're gonna need to start dismantling factory farms, all that kind of stuff, protecting wildlife more. And that to do that, there needs to be people in office that will, you know, like that will fight for that, that will get those laws passed, et cetera, and so forth. And like, even if you can't vote yet, there's still things to do. So like letter writing campaigns, see if you can text bank or phone bank somewhere. What's it called? Poll working. So like working at the polls on election day. That's all stuff you can do if you can't vote yet. And like, those are just like such powerful things to make sure that we can get the people into Congress that'll make the world equitable, that will make it livable. And then also like another thing is like environmental, like inequality and racism are so intertwined. I think that a big thing would also be, I mean, in a very optimistic way of putting it, ending racism, I think is also very, very necessary, because you see a lot of these
Amen.
industrial sites like being in or around Black and brown communities. Like my, where I live, like the Chevron plant is in Richmond, which is where all the Black and brown people live. Meanwhile, I live in Kensington, which is upper class, white, mostly, all that kind of thing. And I mean, we have a water treatment plant over there, but it's not like, you know, dangerous. It's not really loud unless there's construction going on. There's no danger of like spills and that kind of thing. So I think because all that is so intertwined, we need to focus on ending racism as well as focusing on ending climate change, because they're honestly like two sides of the same coin. And just to bring it back, electing officials is the first step to doing that.
Yeah, and sorry to butt in again, but that's actually kind of where the 20,000 people comes from. Is from one of our like most successful campaigns, is a text and phone banking campaign, where we reached, I don't know the exact number of what it was for those two campaigns, but it was quite a large number of people that we did help. I think we did help, not influence the election, because that kind of sounds bad, but help people get out to the polls and make sure they have a plan to get out to the polls, and make sure, I don't know, just to make sure that each person has a plan to get out to the polls, when they're going to get to the polls, and hopefully they will follow through with that and make sure they vote for someone who's going to vote for laws and bills that are going to help the environment.
If also I can add in, oh, sorry, if I can just add in quickly, kind of to take it back to what you were saying originally with like individual and collective action. I think like what we are doing here, we're both as individuals and as JYCM, we're both working with like individual and collective action. I think they're both really great. They work really well hand in hand. I think individual action is maybe more of what traditionally people think of when they think about like climate action, which is like turning off the lights when you're done using them, and converting your home to solar and stuff like that, which is all really, really great. And I think it's even better, and it's really important that those individual actions will lead to then a collective action, or a wider collective action, or many collective actions. I think like one person making a single compost pile for their house is really great, but then if that leads to them inspiring their whole community to make a community-wide compost pile, that's like a really great example of individual action leading to collective action. And let's say like with our phone banking, the individual action there is each person reaching out to, let's say 100 or 200 people that night on the phone, and on the phone and texting. And the collective action there that comes from that is then we have these 20,000 people that have been we've motivated, and we've told you should go vote, and we've given them a good reason for it. And we've used our voices and we've used our power there. And I think that is it's really important. I think a lot of people tend to only focus on individual action. And as JYCM, one of the things we're trying to spread around is individual and collective action, that they're working hand in hand, right? Like we want our Kvutsot, which are like the synagogues and the youth groups all over the country that are kind of adapting our learning that we've given them. We've given them these resources that they can go out. So like that, we are creating collective action individually in each of these states and these schools around the country, which will then create another bigger collective action, hopefully, where JYCM is all around the country, motivating Jewish day schools and synagogues to become more sustainable and lower their carbon footprint.
That's awesome. Thank you, Yona. Thank you, everyone. Eli, Alex. I want to just say one more thing and then ask a question in closing for our conversation today. One other aspect of you making an impact as young people, as youth, is, you just mentioned so many things, but your voice. And I want to give an example that something I'm working on is called a Rights of Nature campaign. There's a movement that I want to introduce to you maybe right now. Maybe you've heard about it, but we have some podcasts with some of the founders of this movement on this that I've interviewed. Thomas Lindsay of the Center for Environmental and Democratic Rights. And he, just like you, Alex, are making connections with the climate movement. Climate justice movement is inherently a movement of whole systems, of interconnected systems. It's not one thing. Everything has to change. Everything has to make a paradigm shift. And so that's his organization is called the Center for Environmental and Democratic Rights, because in order for environmental change to really happen, democratic change has to happen. So you're talking about voting, right? So locally, we're working on a Rights of Nature campaign, which is, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's on the municipal level. So there's that whole level of politics and getting involved, right? Not just state or federal level, that we can get involved in our towns and our communities. And in the campaign that we're developing for next year, we're thinking about having young people in high school present to the town hall, for the vote for this bill to be passed, and say, it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about the young people. The main issue in our town, Great Barrington and in the Berkshires, is we can't. One of the main issues, we can't swim in the Housatonic River. We can't fish in that river. And people who lived here for a long time, they used to. It was wonderful, more than 30 years ago. But for the last more than 30 years, you haven't been able to. I'm not going to get into that whole story, but that's probably not a very uncommon story, right? But we want our children to swim in that river, and your children, Yona, if you live in this area, when you are having children, we want your children to swim in this river. And my son, and that's the other thing. I was, the chief inspiration officer for our organization, the Alliance, is my son. He's 18 months old. He inspires me to do this work, and you inspire me. So I just, in closing, I want to ask you to just share, with parents right now. Speak directly to parents and to your colleagues as youth activists. But actually, I'm asking you to speak to parents right now. And if you're a parent, or if you're not a parent who's a grown-up person who's listening, young people, or you're friends with parents. And so I want you, as the representatives of the Jewish, the climate movement, the Jewish youth climate movement right now, to speak to the parents, and why is your voice so important? Yeah. As in closing, thank you. Whatever comes to you.
Before we sign off, I just want to say if anyone wants to kind of get involved or start a futsal or learn more about JYCM, or if you want to get involved and join a futsal if it's already in your area or anything, feel free to go to our website, jewishyouthclimatemovement.org, and there's a bunch of information there. There's ways to get in contact with us. There's more information on there. So if you have any other questions, feel free to hop on that website, give any of us an email, or anything, and don't hesitate to ask questions, because you're not going to learn anything unless you ask questions about it.
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, and do you want to say anything just in closing to to the listeners, and particularly people that know other youth? What's so significant about the youth voice in the conversation about climate?
I guess I can jump in here if that's okay. I'd say like the best thing to do is to listen. I think like the first step is to listen. Specifically, obviously for older generations and for parents, is to listen to the youth, because we'll be here for the longest. We're here for the long run. We're the ones who's going to be, like you said before, that we're the ones that we're young now. We're gonna be alive in 2050 when this kind of time might come where the Earth will get to a state, the climate will get to a state where it's unlivable here for us. And I think like that means that we are the ones that are going to take the brunt of that. And so I think listening is really important. And I feel like there's sometimes a divide between younger generations and older generations. And I think a really important part of like this climate work is bridging that gap and like getting the conversations to begin. Because a lot of the people that are in power right now, a lot of people that are in offices of power right now, in our country and in the world, are all older generations. Just because they're older than us, they're the ones we're not allowed. I'm not allowed as a 17-year-old to run for president, obviously. But I think like listening is really important, and we've seen that happening, and we've seen that in like listening in numbers, right? We've seen it started just with Greta Thunberg, who left her school for one day on a strike, and now it's turned into, I think she's on she's into thousands now, right? And she's had a whole movement, sparked a whole movement, and now I think that's a really important way for the adults to start listening to us, is to see that we really care about this. And I think I know I've kind of gone off of the question you've asked, but I think like just a really important thing for parents and adults to do is to also to allow your children and allow the younger generations like that space to talk, and that space to have a voice, and also just giving support. Like we're really fortunate as JYCM to have adult mentors who are there, not necessarily to tell us what to do, but to support us if we need help, right? They're there helping us if we have any questions, or if we need financial support or any sort of mental support. And so we're really great to have Hazon there and all the JYCM staff. And so I think that is something that every youth should have that voice and have that support system of the older generations around them.
Thank you, Yona. That's beautiful. Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, it's like my thoughts are very, very similar to Yona's. Like, the reason our voice as youth is so important is because we're going to be the ones living in this. Like, again, we're going to be the ones alive and probably like still kind of working and all that stuff. Maybe like paying for our kids' colleges, all that stuff in like 2050. It's going to affect us a freaking lot. So our voices are important because it's, because it affects us so much, and because a lot of us care so much about like wanting to live in a habitable place, wanting our kids, if we want kids to live in a habitable place. And then something adults can do is like, again, listen to us and support us. Like a lot of the time we've done our research on this kind of thing and we actually do know what we're talking about. So also, I guess, kind of trust us. And yeah, I think that's most of it. Yeah. And also, like, I'd encourage you, like, probably not a lot of this audience, but like, if you're like questioning parts of climate change, or you don't know what's really going on, like all of that stuff, like, ask your kid. If your kid is into that, or like look it up, you know, like educating yourself is also really important.
Yeah, and one thing for if there are any younger kids watching, ask questions, because I know that I would not know nearly as much about the climate or anything in my life if you don't ask questions. And if the adults in your life don't know the answers to that question, the internet is a very good resource that I know I've learned tons of random things off of. You can find a YouTube video about literally anything in the world. So just ask questions, and if nobody knows the answers, Google it and just try and do your research on reliable sources too.
And come to us. Like Eli said before, we have a website. We're really happy to answer any questions. We have a forum. We have all of our emails are open. We have an Instagram. We are a great resource. We really want to be there for anybody, youth, anybody, or you could be any age, anybody of any age. Reach out to us. Although we're predominantly focused toward the youth, we'd love to help anybody. So yes, we are a great resource as well.
All right. Well, thank you, each and every one of you, Alex, Yona, Eli, and to your executive team, your whole group, your core group, and to everyone who's involved in the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. Thank you to Hazon for supporting you, and thank you for your time and your devotion to this work, and for your voice being here. So I think we have talked about doing a part 2 because there are so many people involved, and maybe we can get more into one of the questions you had wanted to talk about: what makes your environmentalism Jewish. So we'll just have that as a teaser for the episode 2 that's to come. So thank you, each and every one, and thank you to the listeners here of our Alliance podcast, and we'll be in touch and see you next time.
Thank you,
so
Lev.
much.